Welcome everyone to the Planning Commission meeting tonight. We're going to start out with an invocation or thought by Commissioner Neighbor, and he's also going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. So I'm still the new person on the commission, and I continue to learn and understand. And in our last meeting, when we met with the city council, I was very, very impressed with the level of interaction and engagement. And the more I sit through these meetings, the more responsibility I'm feeling. I guess that's good news and bad news. But I was very impressed with the level of engagement by the city council to the planning commission in regards to how important they feel that this role is. And I guess as I look at the agenda tonight, again, it probably is an extension of that discussion regarding our responsibility. So I didn't quite know I was getting it. The interview that I sat through was very interesting, but little did I know. So, but that's a good thing. So I also want to say, being on the planning commission, I built a shed here recently, so I felt a lot of responsibility to follow every step of the process because I looked around for other sheds and they didn't quite match up. But Ryan and Scott did a good job guiding me the right way. So it cost me a whole lot more money, but that's okay.
Did it the right way.
Yes, I did it the right way. So thanks to them also. So that's my thought for the day. Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hi, well, it looks like we've got everybody with us tonight except Commissioner Webb and Commissioner Watson, who are excused tonight. And let's go ahead and start with consideration and action to approve the August 20th and the September 2nd Planning Commission meeting minutes. Did everyone get a chance to take a look at those? And did they have any comments or changes? Meg.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes of August 20th and September 5th.
September 2nd.
Oh, second. Dyslexic, yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second by Commissioner Gardner and Commissioner Green. Any ex parte communications or conflict of interest to disclose? Let's go ahead and move on. Don't believe we have any public members except for Councilman Polder. So I'm going to go ahead and skip the public
We
comment.
do have a new one. Alicia
Go ahead.
Tischer is on.
I'm going to go ahead and read the public comments during meetings. Guidelines. Time is made available for anyone in the audience to address the commission concerning matters pertaining to city business. Citizens will be asked to limit their remarks or questions to 5 minutes each. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, such as pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be left with the commission. Speakers are required to have signed in at the door and will state their name and the city they reside in before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address the commission from the podium or microphone and shall address all comments to the Planning Commission. So tonight we've just got some administrative items, and it's really, I think, a follow-on to the joint session that we had a month ago. And, I think there were a number of items that we covered that, maybe we didn't really have a meeting of the minds on, but it kind of brings to light a discussion about, our role and focusing on long-term planning, 10, 20, 30 years, and taking a look at, from the land use perspective on what the best vision is for our city, what we want it to look like in the long term. And I think in the spirit of cooperation, you know, we have really been approaching it. We've had a lot of discussions on all those items that we talked about at the joint meeting. But in that spirit, we've kind of said, well, you know, some of these things are really complicated to implement in the short term. But I think we can't really get derailed or sidetracked by that. You know, I think we really have to focus on what is the long-term vision? That's our role. That's the part we own. How difficult or complicated or whatever needs to happen to implement those decisions over the next 20 years, I think we need to kind of set that aside and just focus on what we as a planning commission need to deliver in terms of long-term planning. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about in both the training tonight as well as some of the comments. Some of them I think are the things that we've talked about and worked on are ready to present. Some need a little more cooking, a little more work. And what I would like to do in the future, when we maybe look at those things, is to meet in the other workroom, the conference room that's over in the other building, and lay it out on the table with the maps and actually draw some lines and produce some kind of a document to go forward, because we talk a lot about it, but we need to now maybe move forward on some of these things. If you guys are in agreement with that, because sometimes this format isn't always productive for that. We can talk a lot about it, but I think at some point we need to just sit down and draw some lines and write up a.
Will we do
you know,
that
write up
tonight?
an agenda.
Will we do
No,
that?
I don't know, because looks like there's a lot of stuff on the agenda tonight.
I can talk about
Okay.
what the idea was tonight. So when you're ready.
So the first item is this training and discussion on the general plan and growth in North Ogden City. So Mr. Hess is going to talk about.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I want to thank Commissioner Nancaro and Commissioner Green for your leadership in this and meeting with us to discuss four key objects or four key opportunities for the city. So what staff decided to do tonight or wanted to do is introduce these topics, get initial discussion on them. And then at the end of I've got a short presentation. We can deep dive into the current Wasatch Choice vision map. It was the Wasatch Choice 2050. They may still be at the Wasatch Choice 2050. I don't know what WFRC will kick that end date out to. They are in the adoption cycle for the regional transportation plan and the regional vision. That covers 5 counties. It's Salt Lake, Davis, Weber along the Wasatch Front, and then Tooele and Morgan counties. With the majority of their kind of heavy planning work around transportation and land use being Salt Lake, Davis, and Weber counties. And then the sister organization, the Mountain Land Association of Governments, is Utah County Summit and Wasatch, and their key focus is really Utah County. So we'll deep dive into that. It has ideas on there regionally about additional commercial centers. And we also wanted to just talk through some of these ideas that came out of the joint work session and the request from the mayor and council about the planning commission really diving into these legislative true planning efforts. And this is where, when we did the training from the previous state ombudsman, Brent Bateman, this is the really like where the planning commission should spend their time. The meat of their time is in true planning. So thinking about looking forward, getting out of the weeds of administrative decisions like subdivisions and site plans and those reviews that are really staff-led and staff brings to you, and get into what do you want the city to look like in the future. So I loved your comment, Commissioner Nancaro, about not worrying about the short-term implementation of these ideas and think more about what would this look like in the future, and we can figure out those policy decisions at a later date, but let's put it in place now to look forward. So, John, can I jump into this? And I'll just connect my computer and see if we can connect to it.
You grabbed the HTML off that table, right?
I did, yep. So we formatted this as, sorry, make sure this is actually in presentation mode. So we formatted this as essentially a training, and we'd like to use this as our 1 hour training opportunity. The state has a requirement for 4 hours of training annually. And if we can get this to go up,
Yeah, I'm trying a couple.
there we go, we win. Okay. So we'll have a facilitated discussion, future land use and policy issues. We're going to ask you the same questions that we had in the staff report. So the intent here is to stop and have conversations with this, hoping to go about an hour. Ryan, I'll ask you if you don't mind taking some notes as we go through them and spend about 10 minutes on each of the 4 topic areas. And then we can familiarize you with Wasatch Choices, the Wasatch Front Regional Council's Wasatch Choice map, how you make comments there, some of the upcoming meetings that we have, and the process. Does that work? Okay. So I talked a little bit about this, but we want to do an overview of the key policy issues. We want to, these issues guide updates to the general plan, zoning, annexation, open space. We have community commercial as well. And we want to focus on long-term planning, not short-term implementation. So the structure tonight, we're going to do 1 hour of the 4 required state required trainings. We'll present on growth topics with a facilitated conversation. Ultimately, the input will inform the general plan and zoning and policy updates. Now, Ryan told me when I put this slide together that a cup of coffee and plans is the quintessential, we're doing planning. So I really like this slide. Generally, for the general plan, it guides your future growth. The state requires a general plan. So in order to do zoning, which is a policy level decision about what you can do on any piece of property, you have to have a general plan. So that's guideline number 1. The general plan has a few key areas that you have to focus on. One is future land use. You have a transportation requirement. You have an upcoming water use element of the general plan, a moderate income housing component, and then there can be a whole suite of other things that people put into the general plan. And we've got active transportation, wayfinding coming up. Cities will get really specific, kind of contextual around their city with what they want to do in the general plan. But if you follow the state's Land Use Development and Management Act, which is our guiding state policy, there's some really core ideas that you need to put into the general plan. And then that allows you to do zoning and figure out exactly what's going to hit the ground. So we know residential development pressure continues. Right now, I heard the updated number from Dave Espinoza, but I'm going to butcher it a little bit. We're about 6,500 residential water connections in North Ogden. That's how we count residential housing units, is the water connection. And then if you add up a series of the multifamily projects that we have yet to come out of the ground, and this is Village at Prominence Point, Cooperstown, the remainder of Freedom Court, which are the townhomes being constructed off of 1700 North, just west of Washington Boulevard, the new West States annexation that'll be called Orchard Bend. We're sitting at between 12 and 1,500 units, depending on what you count, and the residential units and entitled. So we have, of 6,500, another 1,500 units to come in the city that could pop out of the ground today. Essentially, we would issue a building permit if financing in the market would populate those out of the ground. So they're coming just in little pieces. But that residential development pressure continues. And with that, our charge as the staff, and mine as the community and economic development director, is to think about how we balance that residential development with commercial. So sales tax, we're going to talk about sales tax, but Utah has 3 primary funding sources for municipal funding. So you have sales tax revenues, which go into the general fund. And you can think of that as the bucket of money that can really pay for anything, but is used for capital expenses like staff members, vehicles, any number of things are paid for out of general fund. You have property taxes. North Ogden is, I think this is probably unique, but North Ogden has allocated all of our property tax revenue to public safety, which makes it really good to go out to the public and say, we need to increase your property taxes because it's going to help us pay for an additional officer, which keeps your 911 calls prompt and efficient. And then the third is franchise taxes, or they're your fees that you pay for services. That's water, sewer, garbage. And those funds are typically self-supporting. So they're enterprise funds which operate more like a business. And that's when you pay your water fee, your water bill, that collects into a fund that Jason Rennie, the water superintendent, helps allocate those projects out over time. So it's a little different than your capital projects. And you want to be able to balance that three-legged stool across the three funding sources. So you're not overly heavy and reliant on sales taxes, which when they get cut because of, generally the market, or you have a downturn in the economy, that you're hinging, you've got to pivot really quickly and increase your property taxes. And you don't want to be too property tax heavy. That's a city that's reliant only on residential, because it's flat and relatively stable over time, but it doesn't allow you to, increase your funding sources a whole lot. So a concern for staff as we move from 20,000 to 40,000 people is how do we stay, active and vibrant in our commercial areas to continue to pay the bills? So one of the ideas, and I'm going to click forward and then we'll come back to these questions or we can pull them up, is should we and how do we plan for neighborhood scale commercial? Where and how should we accommodate all future commercial, just kind of generally as well as neighborhood? Is there a best housing mix that supports long-term demand for commercial? And then we'll talk a little bit about rezoning today versus vesting the general plan. And that's an item that came up with the city council. I think this is just wildly interesting. And I have this map sitting over in my office. I want to frame it. We have the 1961 hand-drawn general plan rolled up in my office. I'll bring it. It's, great big plan. It's 3 feet wide and about 7 feet long. And I love this because it has a few ideas on there that stand today and some that got dropped off. And the timing that they were dropped off was between 1961 and the 70s, and then the 70s to the 90s. But to point out on here, and I think my cursor will work, right? Yeah. So this is essentially downtown. And this is 2600 North. And I tried to orient all the maps so that 2600 with the little lump on it is the same. This one got moved a little bit. It's right here. But 2600 North, which of course now runs out and becomes 2700 North at the freeway, with that road being completed when, John, the late 90s, early 2000s?
Yeah.
You have Washington Boulevard going north. It was originally going to go east. It ended up ultimately kind of Lakeview swings to the north and west. You've got Mountain Road here that swings around. And I love this because we've contemplated some of these similar ideas in our current general plan, but this would be Monroe and 1700 South as a commercial area. This is 2600 North and 1050 was planned to be a commercial area. This is Monroe. That right there is Bates Elementary School. So when you identify the map, we ended up with an elementary school. And then this is coming up, and this road doesn't exactly exist. It's about 3550 North, but a commercial area up on the hill. And then out on Alberta. Yep, thank you. So that's this area right here. So in 1961, we were thinking more holistically about integrated commercial, residential, public services. These are park spaces, open spaces. There's civic centers, that would be schools and churches that were kind of, punctuated throughout the city. And I'm just really interested in what was the change? Where did we decide that we didn't need commercial further up the hill? And this one right here, I just looking back 60 years from a staff perspective as somebody who hasn't grown up in North Ogden, so take that with a grain of salt. I think we missed out on a commercial opportunity on 3100 as you go up over the Divide Road. I think that would have been a really core, small neighborhood commercial area that would have likely been very vibrant over time. In 2022, we had the general plan designation, and we put in there as staff several little commercial nodes that ended up being not supported at a specific parcel level, but we were able to keep these small asterisks in there. So we have one at 1700 and future Monroe right of way, and another right at the end of Lakeview and Mountain Road. And I think as staff, we still see those as possible areas to do some level of commercial. We're also contemplating one maybe a little bit in between these two, a little bit further south than Mountain Road, but that's to be seen whether or not we have something that'll come up. I still think the Divide Road makes a whole lot of sense out there. And then between 22 and 25, staff helped Wasatch Front Regional Council identify some parcels here that were contemplated as neighborhood commercial level centers. So this is Monroe, and the area that's highlighted here is essentially the Barker Farm. That area generally for a commercial node, the end of 2600. This is not quite 2750 and Mountain Road. This is parcels owned by North Ogden, could be some sort of mixed use neighborhood commercial or other sales tax producing area. And then we retained that one at the end of up on Mountain Road and the extension of Washington Boulevard. So those are currently in the Wasatch Choice 2050 or the next vision draft. And as we have meetings with those folks, and we're going to have one coming up, an evening meeting with Wasatch Front Regional Council, I'll send it out to all the city council and planning commission members, and hopefully we can get some involvement there. We talk about what we want to do in those areas. Do we have any questions on 60 years ago planning, 3 years ago, and kind of what we're doing in the future? Concerns? Are there any concerns from the Planning Commission about locating that commercial and residential areas? But
Just again, making the point that you made in the meeting with the city council, North Ogden is far more financed with property tax revenues than similar cities that surround us, right? That gap is, could you remind me the gap there?
If John can help me with, I don't know that exact number gap.
The best example we have is probably South Ogden. Very similar population size, not that dissimilar square mile size. And their general fund budget is about twice ours. Because of the significant amount of sales tax they get. Property tax, we're actually lower them on property tax. But if you include Northview Fire, then we're getting pretty similar on how much they bring in from a house. But they have a lot more commercial. So their commercial brings in a whole lot of property tax too.
Yeah.
Like Costco's in South Ogden. So it's not in Riverdale. It's not in Ogden. It's actually in South Ogden. And all of a good chunk of them, but the young dealerships are in South Ogden as well. So their sales tax is ginormous.
So Scott, I know we're still on discussion item number 1.
Yep.
But I want to talk more about this and flush it out a little bit more, but it looks like that's actually item 2, correct? We've just talked.
It's just a little, yeah, well, we go through and then we'll talk neighborhood commercial specifically as we go through. This is kind of like a primer a little bit around the general plan. Then the next slide being, this is the last one on this first section, but this slide was presented when we did the adoption of the master or the new land use plan for the general plan in 2022. And staff broke out what the land use designation means on the future land use map. So that's residential hillside, that's the lightest yellow, residential low density, 2-family transitional, which we didn't end up getting passed as a policy standpoint, medium density residential, downtown mixed use, southtown mixed use, and mixed use / multifamily commercial. Right now, our commercial zone allows mixed use. So we have a few, they'd almost be like accessory dwelling units, just onesie, twosie residential units kind of peppered in our commercial area, which is interesting. One that you can see is the physical therapy office, Alan Curve's physical therapy office, which is just south of Jiffy Lube on Main Street, on Washington Boulevard at about 2350, 2400 north, something along those lines. But they have a little unit in the back of their building that's a rental unit. There's another one. There's a few that are built into existing commercial buildings, so people might live there. It's like a live-work unit. So mixed use is permitted, but we've pretty well held off any major residential development in our commercial areas to preserve commercial sales tax base. What we did though as staff is we went through and we identified what the actual land use designation is, and then the applicable zoning district. So this is the difference. This is a visual difference between a general plan being buckets of land use designations versus vesting the general plan, which is what your zoning map looks like. So zoning map is really fine grained. You get down to specific parcel level and identifying the exact zone that you can be, where right now, the residential hillside, which wraps around our city, is made up of HP1, HP2, and HP3. So this map in the general plan doesn't identify what this parcel means versus this parcel. It just says in this area, generally, it's these available zoning districts. And I think the hardest one for our entire city is this yellow line, this yellow number. And it's the problem of the yellow designation in our general plan, because it's made up of R15, which you could throw a rock to right over here, Legacy North, behind City Hall. Several developments of R18, the majority being residential R110, R112 and a half, and RE20. So that's 5,000, 8,000, 10,000, 12,500 square foot lots and half acre. You're kind of working up your zoning designations. And those are all permitted, located, zoned, annexed, and available in this yellow area. So we have a pretty open bucket of land use categories in that. The two-family, this was an idea that came from staff in 22 to reinstitute two-family dwellings in areas where it's contextually similar to the existing residential city center zone. That did not go anywhere. The downtown mixed use is really interesting. It has everything R4, R3, R2, R15, which is similar to that Legacy North. You have commercial zones, MPC zones, and then the Southtown mixed use has some high density around it. Commercial, you also have the Patriot Point Village at Prominence Point within the proximity of that area. And then all of our commercial areas that we have are mainly commercial, but would allow mixed use. So this is the almost entirety of what we have for our sales tax base right now for another 20,000 people to come. I mean, we are very heavily zoned in single family residential. And even with all those moderate income housing units coming, it still won't tip the scale of like a majority shared wall construction or multifamily. So this is kind of an interesting question for the Planning Commission, and I think the City Council has looked at this as a potential is, should we vest the general plan, which would be, you know, to Commissioner Nancarrow's point, really getting down with a map and identifying at a parcel level, this is 5,000 square feet, this is 8,000, this is 10,000, and basically putting like a zoning designation into it. The general plan could always change. That is a legislative process that's available, but the policy would make it, you'd have a high hurdle to clear if you wanted to change the general plan at that point. Where right now you can come in and based on the area, the surrounding, the context, you can request basically any zoning district that are in here, and it's up to the council, to Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the council to adopt. But it's kind of anything everywhere that fits in that's residential.
Could you explain this term of vesting again? I think I kind of understand it. It feels like it's an aggressive approach, but I didn't know that we were empowered to do something like, tell me how you define vesting.
So general plans are not obligatory documents, right? It's not an obligation. It's a plan for the future. But when you get down to the zoning districts, there are several cities, and kudos to North Ogden for really following our general plan, but there are cities that'll just wing a general plan out there, and then they basically don't look at it again when they make all of these legislative decisions for rezones. There were cities that were operating on 20-year-old general plans that hadn't ever been updated, and I have no idea how they were making planning decisions, rezone decisions. So vesting it would be, right now you have areas of the city that are this yellow or this crosshatch, which means open space preservation, attempts to preserve open space. And you would go through and you'd pick individual parcels and decide what is going to be what zone throughout it. And you would greatly funnel it down to this area of the city is only available for these two zones. And then when someone comes in for an annexation or a rezone request, they have some assurance that if they request the item that we've chosen in that particular land use category, their likelihood of getting approved increases dramatically.
Okay.
The flip side of that is that any change to it, if we say that's 8,000 square foot lots and they want 5,000 square foot, they'll have to make a really strong case at planning commission and city council as to why we would approve that.
So it looks at what the existing zoning is, but the vesting goes beyond that and categorizes it.
Yeah, like it prescribes it. Like,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
this is
yeah.
what it is.
So
It
that,
can also preserve land for future
Right.
use, which is something that I think we are
Mhm.
concerned about.
Mhm.
Because we can't plan a park,
yeah,
Or
land,
commercial use
you know,
necessarily.
Mhm.
without actually preserving that land in some
Mhm.
way. But there are some downsides to vesting as well, right?
Yeah, so the downsides that I see is had we vested the general plan 20 years ago, several of the developments that we have today, which I think are likely good developments and responsive to the market, wouldn't have been possible
Mhm.
because we would have vested it under the financing ideas at that time and what the community's desires were at that time, which isn't good, bad, or indifferent. It's just kind of like a period of time.
Mhm.
And I don't pretend to be the smartest person in the room to sit down and say this particular parcel should be this, where
Mm.
5 years from now, the financing could be extremely different, or the market conditions could be so different. And we're sitting in that, we're living that paradigm right now. 2025 is extremely different than 2019 was. You had
Mhm.
very inexpensive money to get, and
But didn't we use an outside consultant on the one commercial evaluation to help get us a better feel for the future?
yeah, we'll do planning studies like that. In Southtown, it was a redevelopment plan. And again, the way to think of that is what could happen here, but not necessarily what will happen. So we don't,
But could we have vested that?
yeah, we
What
could
they
choose.
suggested we could have vested that.
No, because this map that's in front of us is too generic.
Mhm.
So that I call it the yellow blob. We
Mhm.
would need to cut that yellow blob up into this is R15, this is R110. And I think kind of what Scott's even getting at is if you vest a plan for 20 years and then forget about it, like it will not work. And so what you need to almost agree to is if we're going to vest the general plan, then we will talk about it every 3 years in detail and decide, should we tweak it?
Parcel by parcel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
yeah.
kind of goes with the question I have in terms of, so the vesting is really interesting, I think, to a few of us because we like the idea of preserving open space on some things we need. This seems like a way to get there. Can you, I mean, is it like the whole parcel, like it's all North Ogden or nothing? Can you go through and just vest
But partial.
partial
Like
skirts of
along
our city?
Washington Boulevard.
Yeah, like-
Monroe Boulevard.
Yeah, the way you would do that is all of these colors on the map right here are every individual land use designation that the general plan has. So you could create one more, two more, whatever, and just very specifically identify in that land use designation that's open space preservation or rural preservation. You could identify exactly the land uses that you're willing to accept or the policy decisions you'll make. So we will upzone you, but to do so, we'd have to preserve X amount of open space, or you will give us the lot, the value correlation to, we'll give you 3 extra lots, but those lots, when they're sold, that money's going to come to North Ogden instead of to you. So that's a fund to preserve future open space, and we maybe buy open space.
Do that in the absence of vesting the entire
Mhm.
general plan?
Yeah, you could vest specific areas of the general plan, and the general plan as well as zoning just is, it's not an effort it's a process of picking winners and losers. Because on this map right now, you have one parcel that is commercial and one parcel that is single family residential. And by doing that, you are essentially as the city identifying what that person can sell their property for. And that's the hard part about vesting is if you vest it as open space, and John's our land use attorney, but I'll reuse something he said is that every individual piece of property gets at least one building on it. We can't strip off all building rights from, you not on tiny parcels, but if you have a piece of ground, you can get one house on it and we can't strip everything away. So with the open space, I think we'd want to be really careful about identifying specific parcels and not having property owners cry foul that you've just taken away all of my property rights and my property value. And say more along the lines of a policy decision that we will gladly upzone you from RE20 or the holding zone you have, or annex you at a higher density. But in order to do so, you need to provide us with X amount of open space.
And there might be, I don't know, maybe benefits in, instead of just looking, okay, like we want to park in this area. This is where the park overlay is. Instead of just saying, well, it's this person's farm or property. And just looking at that one parcel, if you sort of take a handful of properties
Mhm.
and take, a corner from each of them, then it leaves maybe some negotiating room or some options for the property owner to develop the rest of it in the future around, perhaps a portion of it. It might give the city more negotiating room
Sure.
too, and beyond just coming up with cash to purchase somebody's property.
Yep.
you know.
And the last section of the slide is the open space, and I'll show you what the general plan today shows for the open space map. So go ahead, Commissioner Gardner.
Got a question about if we were to vest the general plan or a portion of it, if a developer comes in and we work out a development agreement over that vested property, how is that?
We would need to amend the general plan. So in theory, for someone to rezone what's vested, they would come in and amend the general plan so the new plan matches the new proposal.
Because I noticed we have quite a few development agreements.
Yeah.
So we would be amending that plan on a regular basis.
Well, yes and no. So if you're going to vest the general plan, then you probably need to be fairly progressive in your zoning. And then you have to hold the line and tell the developers, like, this says you get R18, you don't get R15, you get R18. But we could bake some flexibility in. So Scott lives in a development where the zoning is based on the average lot size as opposed to a minimum. And so you could bake that into our code and say the R18 is an average lot size of 8,000 square feet, not every lot has to be 8,000 or bigger. And then you could end up with some more dynamic creativity that's generated that really is the same house or rooftop per square foot. It's just
But if someone has a small parcel, that average is harder to deal with than a big parcel with lots of lots.
yeah. And yeah, so
And cities we used to trade open space for density. That's what I've seen for 15 years. And what we're beginning to trade for open as opposed is density for homeownership availability. So attainable housing. This has become the new thing. And I've said for the last few years in planning conferences, in meetings like this, that I'm not a bleeding heart for a developer, but there's only so much that they can give up. So the city can't ask for 30% open space designation or fee in lieu of impact fees or something like that, as well as you've got to deed restrict these units for home ownership only, or construct units that will hit attainable housing values. I think that we're going to need to pick and choose what we want to upzone for. And the moderate income housing planning at the state level is looking at overlay zones. So if you adopt an overlay zone in your residential area, it's an automatic pass on your moderate income housing plan. And that would be what John was talking about. If you have an 8,000 square foot zone and you say the overlay is 5,000 square foot, but in order to do it, you have to do these 5 things. And it's, it would be pick your own, but it'd be like constructing smaller houses that will hit a certain price point, or deed restrict them to owner occupied, keep them in a land trust so that they're always available for somebody else, or do priority public safety people get first priority at purchase. Like there's a number of policy decisions you could bake into it. And it's to be seen whether or not the market bites on those options. In many cases, we just had one with the Lyman Barker annexation. They came in, they annexed it at 10,000 square foot lot zoning,
Mhm.
didn't ask for any concessions, didn't want additional density. They wanted just a standard zone. And that pretty well flew through the process, right? Through the annexation process. It wasn't contested, concerning. It was a legal subdivision. And that was located, right smack dab in the middle of our future preservation, future conservation area. And we didn't really conserve anything. And the quarter acre lots, you just don't have a lot of pushback to them from the community, surrounding neighbors, anything, because I grew up on one, so I can think of in my mind what my quality of life was growing up. And I think there's a lot of people generationally who do the same, but it didn't preserve anything. And I love to harp on Northwood Hills. It's a beautiful subdivision, but same exact thing. So that's 2,600 and it touches Oaklawn Park. So from 2,600 in Oaklawn Park, about 1,200 east, 12 east, something along those lines. Same thing. It's right here where number 9 is. Future conservation area, and nothing was conserved. It's quarter acre blanket zoning, and they're beautiful homes and they're a great asset to North Ogden. But it didn't maybe hit the intent of the general plan, which is to preserve those rural feeling areas, right? So I think there's some policy decisions there that we need to think of.
When you say preservation land, I mean, is there a way to zone it as that? I mean, we don't have that zone.
It's like the rural RE20, the half acre zone. I mean, you could zone it. You can't get it's 5 acre zoning. So
But-
one house per 5 acres, but I don't know that,
We preserving it for,
right.
and if we can't, I mean, we don't have all those answers right now, and that's okay, it just. But you
And-
can't really argue or articulate why, why whatever the developer brings to us as their vision, it looks beautiful, and
Right.
we couldn't really have an argument about why that wouldn't be appropriate in that.
Sure. And-
No, Washington Boulevard is different, obviously, but
Mhm.
yeah, that's it's interesting.
Well, I'm gonna jump through this because we've got 9 more slides, and then we can have the conversation or go back to any of the individual conversation points. We came around to this kind of in the commercial and residential areas, and on the right side of this slide is the Wasatch Choice Centers designation that we'll see in the Wasatch Front Regional Council map. What we think of as neighborhood commercial are small markets, small services, home enterprises. They should hopefully be walkable and convenient. They fit into the neighborhood character and aren't overly traffic generating uses. This would be like a small convenience store that maybe isn't gas pumps, right? Just think of like a corner store, basically. The questions in the staff report: should we plan for neighborhood scale commercial? Where and how should it occur? What would the housing mix near this commercial be? And that's everything from single family up to mixed use or multifamily. And what compatibility standards should we plan with homes? And here are some examples locally. So one is Cafe Mercantile. It's 26th Street and just east of Harrison Boulevard. It's an old house that's been converted into a coffee shop. It's really cute and lovely inside, and it's just an old, long-standing commercial venture right integrated into a residential area. This is in West Kaysville, near where I live. There's an old barn structure that's the Case Creek Veterinary Clinic. You drive through. This is Angel Street. Layton Parkway is just a little bit north of here. And then at the time that this picture was taken, it wasn't converted yet, but this barn now, they've changed all this landscaping out here, and it's a wedding and event venue. So you go in, it's an old historic wood timber barn inside, and they host events in there. A little more intensive use, but still is the neighborhood scale, is 1500 East and 1500 South in Salt Lake City. It's a small neighborhood center. It's got a couple of bookstores and a little walkable restaurant. And again, it's really cute. It's right in between 2 blocks that are just full residential homes on the blocks and the avenues of Salt Lake. It's not really the avenues, it's kind of the eastern south of the college area.
Do any of these have sort of transitional zoning around those commercial, or they just go right to?
It's pretty much just
Residential.
right to the commercial, and then residential is next door. Yeah.
I think our residents would not like that transitional.
Yep. And therein lies the really interesting thing. And this,
Yeah.
this is Scott Hess talking, not maybe North Ogden's, planning department talking, but I always find it really interesting that we will spend so much money as individuals and travel to areas like European countries, or even if you've ever been outside of DC to that area where it's very walkable, and you take a train and you go to the zoo, and then you walk out of the zoo and you hit a coffee shop, and right next door is $1 million single family home that, we all think about, oh, it'd be really neat to live in this area. And then we fly home and we drive everywhere. We are scared of it, but at the same time, we travel to these places and enjoy them and experience them.
Yeah.
So why don't we take little slivers of it and bring it back home? And I think it's because it's scary. We're afraid of the unknown. And I love this example for that reason of the residents would freak out about it. If you took 2025 and you said, we're going to carve out a giant piece of the center of the city, and we're going to do a fish farm, and we're going to bring all these people in from regionally and, all over the state. And we're not only going to do it in the middle of our city, but we're going to do it on a 20-foot wide gravel access lane and have no real good identified parking. And it's not going to meet any American with Disability Act standards. It's going to feel like you've, stepped back several decades in time. And we just, we're going to do this right here in the middle of town. And I think people would come unglued, right? Can you imagine this going in? But we are more than happy. We love the fish farm. I'll use it. I've got pictures of me at 4 years old at the fish farm as a little kid. And I think it's really fun. It's a great use. And it's one of those legacy historical uses that I don't even know how you would zone for this today. I don't know how you would recreate it, but it exists. And this is contextual neighborhood commercial. This is like how you legalize and improve and get farm stands and better pop-up farmers markets along our Fruitland drives and our other areas of town. So when we say the neighbors will push it back against it, I think it's all based on context. What do they want? What would they desire? And this would be we really need a pretty robust public process, I think, with this. Otherwise we could get complete pushback and no desire for this.
I think, you talk about people, freaking out, right?
Mhm.
About this or that. When you buy a home in, let's say, Alexandria, Virginia,
Yep.
next to a coffee shop, you know what you're buying. You're buying a home next to a coffee shop
Mhm.
right in town. You're buying less car,
Mhm.
more bike, less house, more expensive. You know the trade-off.
Mhm.
I think that when you refer to Europe and DC and older places that were developed before an automobile, everything starts to make a little bit more sense.
Mhm.
We're doing the inverse now, right? Everywhere in town here has a 60-foot right of way.
Mhm.
But I think in my opinion, just based on my limited urban studies, but it's, I've done it. I think you begin in the areas where people are already on top of each other a little bit, at least in our rural sense, right?
Mhm.
So in my opinion, with the neighborhood commercial, like the trout farm's perfect, right? It makes sense for that part
Right.
of town. That's why it hasn't been carved up and chewed up and spit out into homes or apartments or something else, because it kind of just fits in.
Mhm.
But I do think when like Commissioner Nancaro, when you bring up Washington Boulevard, I don't know which part of Washington everyone's imagining, but for me, I think the hidden gem for these ideas is up Washington Boulevard, up to like Alberta Drive. And everything east of that, to like North Ogden Elementary, and then, down around behind us, those are those older lots that are already pinched. People have taken their carport, converted it into a garage. They got stuff going on in the back, and they're already, to me, when you're talking the neighborhood commercial in our area, people start panicking because you go, all those cars in my neighborhood.
Mhm.
What a disaster. But if you get into these more denser neighborhoods where there's already population there that can hoof it, because like my neighborhood has a retention pond at the bottom, and you'd like to imagine that we could just bury the retention pond and put some the underground tanks that they do everywhere. We could just put a community neighborhood development and sell eggs out of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, but only 30 houses are walkable, and the rest are going to be parking and doing those things. But you go what, a mile and a half, west of 1050,
Mhm.
and you've, in my opinion, you've just got more people. You start self-supporting.
Yep.
You're not importing, you're self-supporting what's going on.
And we'll just kind of seed this idea now for you to think about, but even more of an opportunity is above Long Bench. So all of that developable land above Mountain Road, north of Mountain Road, all the way up to the power lines. If you've ever driven from the bottom of, well, I mean, Jake, if you've ever driven from Jake Drive to Lee's Marketplace, it can be 15 minutes. It can be from the top of the cove to the bottom. If you hit any traffic or depending on the route you take, you get behind a gravel truck, it can be 10 to 15 minutes to get off the top of the hill. And it's almost its own like microclimate of development up there. And that's why I think the neighborhood commercial around Mountain Road could and should make sense. And maybe it's not inherently walkable, but it's some service up there. So you don't have every single trip you need to make down for milk and eggs and toilet paper all the way down to the bottom of the hill.
Correct.
And I think as you're north of Long Bench and west of the Cove, that area up there, which is owned largely by one developer, it's currently under a development agreement, represents some pretty massive opportunities for the city to look at holistic neighborhoods that might be a range of housing types, a range of land uses. And that, of course, those are deep policy decisions, but I think the Planning Commission will get to weigh in on that if those changes were to happen. And to me, that's an area where you have a blank slate. You could really think about what should and could go up there and reduce the number of vehicles coming down.
Yeah.
And similarly, Monroe, you have an 80-foot right-of-way coming in the future. Do we need every single dentist's office and title company and small, quiet use to happen all on Washington Boulevard? Or can we pepper some of those uses in on Monroe where they're really good neighbors and it's just one less car getting out to Washington Boulevard. I mean, that's right now, everything you do in the city, you have to travel to one major north-south corridor to kind of do anything.
Scott, how does those office type uses, what kind of revenues do we?
You get property tax revenue. So the increase,
Property.
yeah, you don't, some of those, if they're service-based, there are some sales taxes on services, depending on what they're providing there. But for the most part, you get a greater level of property tax increase because those residents aren't paying the reduced property tax rate for it being a single
Do we
family
want
home.
to increase in the property tax or in the sales tax?
Yes.
All of the
A
above.
higher level of that land, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But you can't control who and what comes. You zone it for commercial and you hope it's retail. I mean, you go up into the Cove and some of these newer developments adjacent to it, you start to go, even a restaurant with a ghost kitchen that everyone door dashes their dinner from North Ogden,
Mhm.
not from Harrisville.
This is what I was talking about earlier when I said, I think one of these things is ready to be written up as an annex to the general plan. Is it all inclusive? No, but we've spent a tremendous amount of time and discussion already on particularly 3 areas of commercial, like neighborhood, we
Neighborhood
even came up with the zone, like neighborhood center zone. And it really is those 3 yellow, I don't know if you can go back to that.
Yeah, well,
Those 3 yellow areas, and it's kind of like what you were talking about, Commissioner Bailey, is like, what we need to look at, this is our long-term vision hat. So when we look 20 years in the future, we have to think about what Monroe Boulevard, what Mountain Road is going to look like in terms of travel those roads. And what we need to support those. And so when you look at so on the top of here, yeah, so the top would be at Washington Boulevard
and
and
Mountain.
Mountain Road. Well, now's the time, right? Because who are you impacting right now? We have a study behind it. I think there's even like traffic studies for the future
Yeah.
of this area. And then we had a discussion about the one the farthest on the east that's over near where the
That was
equestrian park
Very
is.
city-owned property.
City-owned property. We've already had the discussion about it, but there's a study behind it, right?
Mhm.
And you say study, the Wasatch Regional Council.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it's ready to like go forward. The other part is along Monroe
Yeah,
Boulevard.
that's there too.
The Barker.
It's there too. And I think all that's there now is what, an alfalfa field or
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah.
And so who's impacted now if we plan this for the future?
Those
We
three.
sort of preserve these
Those-
areas, rezone them,
Mhm.
however but I think the mechanism would have to be, how do you sort of like present this? Is it an addendum to
Yeah.
the general plan? And are there other areas like you were talking about? I know that there was a fourth area that we'd kind of talked about that you guys had put some thought into. I think it was at
1050, was it, or?
It's a little further south. It's one that I don't want to, I'm not ready to publicly say what we're looking at because there's property owners we want to talk about,
We're
but
talking about like
Yeah.
the entrance to the canyon or,
Mhm.
you know, somewhere maybe further north along Mountain Road.
Yeah,
There's three of them we know right
Yeah.
now.
I-
The lines are drawn.
Yep.
Studies there.
Yeah.
We've already
and
done
one the
things.
city owns, right?
So
What's the next step?
Yeah, so the process would be to identify it on the future land use map. So you would update this 2022 general plan future land use map to solidify those areas as neighborhood commercial. You'd pick a new color because it'd be a new land use designation. And then we would write up a blurb about what can go here. You know, what does this mean? What is available in this area? We do have a zone that we had started creating when the zoning Title 11 was changed. And we actually have some permitted uses that identify or are identified in neighborhood commercial, but we have nowhere else in the code that we have neighborhood commercial. So it's like a floating land use map or land use designation essentially that doesn't land anywhere on our zoning map. So those are the process. I mean, the process would be planning commission identifies areas and some language and then sends that as a recommendation up to the city council to update this to the 2025 general plan future land use map.
Do you just say that we already have a zone that you feel like we would apply to it? Is that what you were saying with
We have
neighborhood
the
commercial?
bare bones of a zone. Yep. We would, if the general plan were amended to include that, then I think the right process would be to go back and do the same thing with the policy lever, the actual zoning code itself. And we'd share that zone up, and you probably use several examples across the region as kind of a template for that. And then send that up the line to the city council for adoption. So that would
The
create.
zoning code and the future land use map updates, those are kind of like two action items that would
think-
go to city council?
And the reason I would make them two action items is because you could spend a little less time on the general plan and send it up to the legislative body, who's the policy makers. They create they create the law and then we administer it, right? So if it goes up to city council and it's just an absolute no starter, then we haven't spent a whole bunch of time writing a code that won't be utilized. So the way I would do it is future land use map first, and then on the heels of that, if it's accepted, write a code that meets that future land use map.
I mean, is the strategy though to just say this is neighborhood commercial, or is the strategy to pick enclaves throughout town where you allow high density housing, like single family gradient to two family gradient to
So I'll give you the yes answer again. We really should do
like
both.
create a borough?
Yeah. Because what we're getting right now, and I don't think this is, again, it's not good, bad, or indifferent, but we have some little infill properties. And one is, you know, the council will be talking about the Atkinson Pauling property next week. So this isn't on a formal agenda yet, but you'll see it on an agenda tomorrow. It's a little infill piece between Fernwood Development and Ward Farms. This is Fruitland before 2100. So it's off of Fruitland. It's currently in the unincorporated county, but they've got an annexation idea with a zoning density that's slightly, not slightly, is higher than the surrounding areas. And it's a small infill project, so it's not well identified on our general plan with what it should be. But it's one of those ideas that they're throwing out to see what sticks. And so to your point, I think it's both. You'd have neighborhood commercial, and also, staff is supportive of looking at the Monroe corridor and how do we buffer those existing really nice single family areas? Should we have some higher density commercial or higher density and maybe small commercial against Monroe to make it quiet for those existing single family homes? I think it's impractical to have more and more driveways on an 80-foot right of way.
Do you find public perception of, well, we're making it quiet for you by adding higher density, buffering you from a commercial zone? Does that go over well? Is it better than buffering them right up against a little neighborhood coffee shop? I mean, I don't know if you have any
Well,
feedback on
The
that.
discussion about this piece right here, which was, it's Ward Farm south of 1700, and there's an existing 8,000 square foot development called Ward Farms. And then the remainder of the property is owned by Rainey Homes right now. I'm sorry, it's Woodfield Farms, not Ward Farms. So they had this idea, build Monroe, get some increase in density as you get closer to Monroe. And those neighbors at that time, which is about 2 years ago, were you here, Ryan? So just the beginning of Ryan's time, were against it. And I think it's because anything other than what you live in is scary. And so for them, you've got, and this isn't, again, wrong, it's just quality of life perception. So they were told the property over there that's currently a field will look just like our property. And then the market conditions shifted between development of Woodfield Farms and the time that that property was being considered for development. So there's some, I mean, the public perception is hard right now, and North Ogden is still, we're pretty well a primarily single family residential bedroom community, which is great. It's beautiful neighborhoods, beautiful community. But I think we need to think strategically about what the next 20 years looks like so that we don't get way behind the curve.
And that's what I mean, like, I think if we started to think about how complicated it is or what, maybe a property owner might be disadvantaged and how do we
Yeah, I think you have to go with some,
negotiate it? I think we need to just say, what is our city gonna look like?
Yeah.
And, hey, maybe the current elected officials may not be on board with it, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong vision for 20 years from now. You know what I mean? And so we have to kind of look and say, if we start saying, oh, these neighbors are going to be
Yep.
upset and,
Yeah.
that's important in the short-term implementation decisions, but we have to say, what are these roads going to look like
No, I totally
in
agree.
20 years?
I just don't want the
And
whole
we need-
proposal to
We need
sink.
some commercial to
Yeah.
Yeah.
support all this traffic, right?
And I like what you're saying is we really have a study that supports this.
It's ready.
Right.
The
To me-
Wasatch Regional.
To me, this is the one,
has-
we've talked about this before.
Yes.
Like how many more times we need to talk about it? I feel like we need to sit down at the table, draw the lines,
Well, but
write something up and move it forward.
but don't we
Mhm.
have the lines, right? Or are you
Well, we
thinking?
have the lines for these three, which I think we can go forward with. Then I think once sort of this future land map or, the process is in place, a zone is created, then maybe, we
I
go
see.
back and look at some of these other things that were in the 22 general plan.
Think
But
big, start
I
small.
think these three are
Yeah.
critical that
I mean,
you know what I mean? This is ready to me.
Yeah.
This is ready.
and
to
you
go
and you've
forward.
referenced like Washington Boulevard so many times tonight, and I honestly think we had the one project here. It was a house, and they were turning into their husband's
Yeah.
law firm, and
Right,
the
right.
gal was an architect.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that we should paint that all the way up Washington to Alberta Drive and be done. And when you get to Alberta Drive, paint it on the east side, clear up to, about halfway between Alberta and 3100, and just say,
Professional
'cause a
office.
little bit, you got to fill the dreams this, right? We can't force something, but I think that little corridor, it's not going to push west from Washington very far. But I do imagine it moving towards the junior high and the elementary east, because the lots are so
Yeah.
small already that it begins to, as time goes on, and I'm taking a lot of my discussion off, study and like I did a master's thesis in Seattle kind of on this idea. But they have just it's similar to us. It's really easy to go north and south in Seattle. It's a pain in the butt to go east and west. It's just the way it is. And so everywhere where there's these cross streets going north and south, they only have a handful. That's where these neighborhoods start.
Yeah.
These little boroughs start to happen. The density moves out, and then by the time you get halfway between the next neighborhood, you're in single family housing again, and then it starts to pick back up. But the population demands it now, that it makes financial sense. Scott's been talking a lot about, financing. In a lot of these areas like Salt Lake, I'm referencing Seattle, the financing begins to pencil buying a home and tearing it down. And it happens everywhere. And that's all these great neighborhoods we're talking about. It's because it started to make sense for people to buy an old small home and level it and put a coffee shop and some apartments above or whatever, right? So I think, to me, that would be the strategy. This is a long-term plan. You allow anything to happen up Washington and in these selected areas, but nothing's going to happen. It then guides our decisions.
Mhm.
And when someone comes in and it's something we really love, we hop on it
Yeah.
and go. But that's just kind of my take. You go with the areas where it's already.
Mhm.
And so I think Washington, last thing, I'll just repeat myself, but I think from clear down by the car wash to Alberta Drive, we just need to paint it blue or whatever color,
Even if that's
Blue.
It's just
Not
along the
RE20.
road, and then behind that, the
I'm just
property
saying
owner
the
can.
first
put
adjacent
something
lot.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and when you do that, to me, that's where we could start doing our job and use language.
Right.
Language would be
Agreed.
street facing buildings, parking behind, I'm just giving
Mhm.
examples,
Mhm.
but to me, that's where the world's going in North Ogden. So I would say, as a practice run, that would be the one. It's a safe one.
I think that's a
We
great,
can't goof it up.
that's a
Mhm.
great idea to add to this idea of adding the commercial neighborhood pockets. Whether it's the same or not, we can keep debating, but I think that's a
Mhm.
great idea.
I mean,
If we're gonna open this map up and.
how many people were here to fight against it?
Right.
None. So for me, I think that's the safe.
Well,
bet.
it's forward looking.
Yeah,
it just
we've
is.
set the precedent already. So anyway,
Well, I think it's Washington and those other ones, right? Washington Boulevard and the other ones on the Wasatch Regional Council.
Yeah.
The three.
So I've got just like.
I think there are more,
Yeah,
but I think
I think we need
these
to
are
get some
ready,
practice.
these are ready to be like presented on a pretty.
A document.
I want to get to that map and show you how to use
Scale
it.
up as we go.
It's all fully fleshed out. Now, I think what it is important, in our joint meeting, I kind of got the sense that, maybe some of them were trying to think about it for next year or the next year, and they couldn't picture
Yeah,
the
yeah.
exact business
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
there. But I think we just have to step back and say, this is like what these roads are going to look like in 20 years, and we don't have to decide what businesses. We don't have to
Right.
decide what they're going to be. We just have to know that there's going to be a lot of traffic moving in and out of our city on those corridors.
Implementation and look at.
And
the
but
vision.
we need to take some steps now
Yeah.
to preserve some of these pockets.
Agreed.
And it's all there for us, right?
So I've got just a couple, the two last things, and then I'm going to jump into the Wasatch, WFRC.org and the Wasatch Choice and show you how to get it and navigate it. And then any last questions, and I don't want to keep you too
I
late.
just have one more, and it's
Yeah,
just
go
so
for it.
off topic that I want to miss it. Talking about sales tax, everyone buys a grundle of Amazon, at least in my neighborhood. Are we getting that sales tax?
Luckily, yes. So the state legislature changed that in like 2019, John, is that right?
Yeah.
Right before
pandemic.
COVID. And we receive a point of purchase portion of that sales tax that we weren't collecting before. And that's been.
I think we should stop planning and get more
Yeah.
people living at home.
My house in Kaysville, I know, is the generator of sales tax. for
Third
hill
acre,
farms.
bring in the rich people and they'll be buying Amazon.
I don't have the exact numbers, but it is hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales tax we get through Amazon.
For the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more than $20,000. Let's just say that.
That's good.
Which, and that's another example I love is, I worked in an office full time, and then March of 2020, they sent me home. I worked from my house, right? And I worked in a house, second story, out of a bedroom window, and I looked, and the number of times delivery trucks drove through my neighborhood, I was shocked at how much it's happening. It's just like this constant
You shocked
stream.
they
They were all
delivered.
they were all delivering to my house. But I think it's this hidden commerce we see, and we'll sit in these meetings and we have residents fight against many assisted living units or daycares and swimming lessons and these things that they're so concerned about traffic. And it's like, I had 6 Amazon trucks show up to my house yesterday because Prime Day, and they're
You
delivering,
notice.
and nobody notices, right? So it's kind of this hidden traffic that's coming in. So I've got annexation and open space that I just want to talk about a little bit. So the annexation process is outside of everybody's control. It starts at the city recorder's office. It actually starts at the county, then the city recorder. We annex via petition, and I love this annexation process that was by Utah League of Cities and Towns because it says the optimal annexation process includes the planning commission reviews the petition, which is the way it works in our city. So property owner submits for annexation. It's kicked out to all departments in the city. So water, sewer, stormwater, it goes to power, gas, everybody, can we provide the services in this area? And then it's booted back to the planning commission where you consider the general plan and the land use designation. And then it's all packaged up as a recommendation to the city council. And they, as the legislative body, it's always important to discern between administrative decision-making where we are administering the code and the legislative decision-making where they are making the law. They decide to accept it or not accept it. I don't have a copy of our annexation map, but it looks like this map here, where if you notice, every single square inch of the city is colored in a color. And we have several pockets. I mean, the fish farm, for instance, is in the unincorporated county, but we have covered it with a line because it's in our annexation policy. It's an area of the city that we would expect would become North Ogden should the property owner ask for it. We have some really funny little areas of Weber County in our property. I mean, I could show you some that are one tiny parcel, a quarter acre alone that's sitting still in unincorporated Weber County. So to Commissioner Neighbor's point, if you want to get a shed permit, you go down to Ogden downtown to the Weber County office and you pull your shed permit there, not from our city. And it's kind of confusing and interesting. But this whole area that's number 6 is, what's that? Go ahead.
If it's unincorporated.
If it's unincorporated. So you have little pockets of unincorporated, and some of them are, people have kept them for whatever reason, animal keeping, or because they have the perception that their property taxes stay lower if they're in the unincorporated county. Some of it is just that it's really hard to administer code enforcement across 15 cities and a county as large as Weber County. So sometimes they just want to be left alone, and we get to drive past them with blinders on and not worry that they've got whatever military surplus stuff growing on their property. That's
Just curious, is there a
Is there-
map that shows these? Because this one has all the colors and
it's our zoning map is hollow in the colors. So our actual zoning map is white with those areas.
white
um,
spots. I'm with you guys.
But these spots, so like number 6 here is about 50-50 Weber County. And this is a great example of an area that Harrisville and North Ogden have decided what the line is where the annexation will happen. And if you're familiar with Montgomery Farms, it's a little subdivision off of 2250, and you kind of back into it. It's a single family zone and residential neighborhood. And it's on the west side of Washington Boulevard, and you drive down it and you can count the lots. And I know which one it is, but there's like 4 houses in North Ogden, and then the rest of them are in Harrisville. And it's the split line between where the sewer literally runs. It's like, who can service this area from a water, sewer, and stormwater standpoint? In some areas, we have joint agreements, and Lauren's familiar with this, where our sewer might flow out onto Harrisville's pipes, and we have an agreement for that particular portion. But the annexation areas are identified based on what we can and can't service. And that's what we've had where we are. And in our area, I feel really fortunate to say that between Pleasant View and North Ogden, Ogden and North Ogden, Harrisville and North Ogden, those lines are firm. So we don't have any double annexation policy areas where we have to fight with them, or property owners can come in and kind of pit the cities against each other and get the better zoning of the two. We essentially know exactly where our city's going to be from an annexation standpoint. The policy question then becomes, do we force annexation on property owners? And up to right now, the city council has not done that. But I know that Weber County would love to offload all of their islands. And you can do a large kind of bulk annexation into your city and leave all of the land uses alone. You just leave them as legal non-conforming uses until the property land use changes. And you kind of adopt in small areas the underlying county zoning, so animal keeping can continue, larger agricultural structures can continue, all of those things that they've done historically. And then as soon as they're ready to build any number of subdivisions, whatever, they just come up to code at that point. So that's a policy decision to, ask ourselves is, should the city annex those internal islands? And even further than that, listening to the state's legislative policy committee, I think that the state is going to consider counties of the second class, which is Weber and Davis and a few other Washington County. We only have one county of the first class, which is Salt Lake County in the state. They did this, that by 2027, all unincorporated islands must be annexed into a city in counties of the first class by 2027. So that's coming up really, really soon. And it sounds like there's desire to do that in the smaller counties as well. So we would receive, or smaller population counties. So we may get that state guidance, and then we're forced to do it by a certain date anyways. I think it'd be a good, personally, as the planning department, I think it'd be a good idea. It would create more stability for people and knowing where they're at. There are several areas of the city that people don't even realize that they are in the unincorporated county, and it's confusing for them in an urban area.
So it's good for the city.
The
Citizens.
It can be. It depends. It's good for it if the policymakers decide that it's a good decision. And up to right now, they've said, we'll annex areas in the annexation petition area, the boundary, but we will not force anybody to come in with them. So we've left people alone, and it's a private property rights issue. So you ask, is it good for the city? It depends on whose lens you're looking at that it's good from, because it can feel like infringing on private property rights because you're forcing somebody to leave one jurisdiction and come into your jurisdiction. The place they're leaving alone right now are the peninsulas, and that's the areas where two cities touch, and that gets far more complicated in areas of high growth. And we're lucky, and that's why I said we're fortunate that we have annexation petitions that butt up against each other. But those annexation areas are another area of high opportunity, right? They're not zoned. We can do anything through a legislative decision we want to, and we can plan for them today, and we won't get a lot of residential pushback because most of those areas are small. And then the last one is the open space preservation. So this is your current general plan map for open space preservation. It's a series of existing parks with a quarter mile and a half mile buffer around them, and some asterisks that went in 2015 of places that we should have additional parks. And we use this to inform decisions. But again, the general plan is not an obligation. It's not, property owner who lives right here isn't forced to give up their land use rights to give us a park. It's more an exercise of where are we under parked or under open spaced in the city. And you can see a few, really the southern portion of the city, both east and west. We're desiring more open space park space. This northern kind of central west area, and then certainly up in the north. And generally for North Ogden, we have amazing access to the foothills. We have Lakeview Park, which is a really fun natural park. It's hilly. What we lack, or what we could use more of, is flat programmable park space. Think soccer fields, baseball fields, place to play flag football. That's what we really need. And in talking to our former Parks Director, and I think Jamie Gill and Becca would agree with this, we're probably like 20 to 30 acres short for planning for the future. That's what we would shoot for in the future, is about 20 to 30 acres of additional flat park space.
And it is correct that there's pretty much one property owner, is that my understanding after the joint session, that's all along the north quadrant here?
Yes, yep,
And
it's,
there's an existing development agreement already?
yes.
Does that,
The western
okay,
half.
does that carve out any park space or can we not know that yet?
It doesn't currently it carves out some open space, but not park space.
The interesting thing about it though is that that development agreement was signed 20 years ago. And it was under a very specific development pattern that today's market may or may not support. You know, they may come in and continue to slowly build up the hill at those standard 10 to 15,000 square foot lots. But my guess, and in talking to the property owner and other surrounding properties, is that they, you know, there may be a desire, and this is with all development agreements that last a long time, is to unwind that development agreement and enter a new agreement or a new zoning decision. In which case, if it goes back to a legislative decision, all bets are off and everything's back open for negotiation.
And so John said it's open space, not park. Does that just mean the funds are not, there to place a park? Or are we actually saying these are fundamentally different?
Yeah, very different.
Uses.
Yeah, one is, think like a 2750 North Trailhead to Coldwater Trail.
Natural
That's
versus,
open.
okay.
Correct. Yep.
So
Your
we,
drainages would
okay.
be open. All the stuff that's through the center of the cove, which if you look at a property rights map or property map, the city owns all these corridors up through there and it feels like you'd be walking in someone's backyard, but you can, travel by foot up and down through the cove, through those open spaces.
So if a school becomes available,
If a what?
if a school became available,
Huh?
a school district building.
Yeah.
Would a acquisition like that, does the city have first right to try to purchase that?
I doubt it. No.
But historically, schools do typically talk to cities first.
Yeah.
It happened in Ogden, it happened here. The one time it didn't happen is up on the hill. Weaver School District actually owned a parcel and they had an agreement with the landlord that if they weren't, or the previous owner, that if they didn't use it for school, then they would sell it back to them.
So is the LDS church or other churches plan for churches in our city? Do we have an inventory of those?
We don't, yeah.
Yeah, they don't currently own any additional parcels in our city. Typically what happens is they have folks that as they see houses coming in, that'll go out and start talking to the landowners to buy a 5 or 10 acre piece or whatever it is.
They're a pretty quiet buyer as from what I've seen over the last 15 years, is if they buy a site before the place is developed, it ramps up property values. And so I think they're pretty quiet and try to buy sort of at the time that the development is happening. And that's similar with schools. Schools go in and try to buy it, but sort of quietly so that they don't have to buy it in inflated.
I'm just thinking
value.
if they're, if that opportunity became available, I don't know if we have a policy on it, but it would certainly be something we'd be interested in acquiring to get a park or something like that. But
I think this is when let's put our long-term
Yeah.
planning hat on and not get in down in the weeds, but there is like a parks plan, a parks overlay. I mean, even something like this. If we had like some sort of a workshop and sat down at a table and actually drew some lines around where we think these future parks should be, not get
too detailed.
not get into like how they're going to be paid for and all that kind of stuff, but really with the growth we know is going to happen and maybe where some flat land still exists. And, I think we have some ideas of where those are, but what short-term, steps can we take now to maybe preserve those areas for the future? What are options?
Is vesting the only option, like vesting just park space / open space?
Some sort of a rezone vesting process, yeah.
Because otherwise what keeps happening is we get these tiny developments one at a time
If
and.
we don't
still
preserve
over
it now, it's not going to be an option for us.
Mhm.
And so I know these are difficult things, how to fund parks and, you know, hard decisions and impacting the rights of property owners, but I think we can't be so short-sighted that, you know, we can't, we have to do something to preserve some of these areas now. I just,
And we have,
whatever mechanism that takes, we need to move forward.
we bought Barker Park 20 years ago, right? And now we're trying to find the money through our impact fees to build Barker Park. We can buy it. So that's one option. You can do a fee in lieu of, like I had mentioned. So there's a bucket of money, or you create an account that is a savings account to buy future property. Or you can create the policy decision that is, we will rezone you and increase your density by this percentage if you give us X amount of open space. And the thing that I've struggled with as we've had developments come in the last 4 years is that we're doing it like 5 to 10 acres at a time. So it's really hard to pick up a 1.5 acre little mini park. And our parks department, yeah,
Like a corner of a
Right.
park, right?
and our Parks Department doesn't want to or may not be able to maintain those very well. So does it make more sense to begin identifying areas we want to acquire a piece of property and start carving off money
Yeah.
in those areas? So then it would be creation of, you'd have like the southwest area of the city. So you would make a recommendation that a policy decision be all future growth in this area, the impact fees are dedicated to buying a piece of ground here. And then we start watching for opportunities to pick up a piece of property that's about the right size, or negotiate and work with developers as they develop to retain and hold some of those open spaces. Because it's a willing buyer, willing seller transaction. If the city has the money to purchase them, then we can do that. But that's capital dollars right now we don't have allocated.
Yes.
If a box is drawn tomorrow, and then that's designated somehow,
Mhm.
whether it's being built now or 20 years from now, at least when a development proposal becomes before us, we know where that line is.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Or so,
Whether
yep.
it touches part of that, or,
Right.
I mean, I'm simplifying it, I know, but I feel like there must be a way that we could draw some lines, you know, and to work around. You know, will those be the exact lines at the end of the day? I don't know, but
It's always interesting. Parks are named after people. Do they donate the money? I mean.
Yeah,
is it
dedicated
Is
land.
is it a gift?
Mhm.
And they just named the park after them.
Well, it can be. So, old historic parks, it was probably like a family legacy.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
Barker Park, for instance, was sold, and the sales agreement came with a number of not restrictions, but kind of, we want these particular things in here as part of the Barker heritage of
Yeah,
the city.
that's what's named
So
after.
that's one way that it happens. The other is whoever the underlying property owner, there's a development, it increases the number of doors available, so the sales price works, and then they dedicate you 5 acres. And
Okay,
um,
so that happens.
I love John's comment of subdivisions are named after what they eliminated by putting down the houses. So it's Orchard Bend and
Well, I think
Cherry
the
Springs
university-
Villas and
The university gets a lot of stuff free.
Yeah.
By a naming opportunity.
Sure. Yeah.
Right, so.
land is just so valuable right now
Yeah.
that it's difficult for
For that
anybody
to
to
happen.
dedicate. I mean, they really have to take, everything's a bottom line. They got a pro forma that they have to meet, and I need this many doors on this square footage of
Yeah.
acreage. And if you can decrease lot size and they can still get their value out of it, then that's how they dedicate land. And that's where we used to trade a lot of density for open space. That was a pretty common
Yeah.
development agreement change or legislative change.
Yeah.
But now we're asking developers to give us income restricted units or dedicated moderate income housing. And that's where I said the trade-off is like, we can only ask for so much. And I think it will end up being kind of a this or that type of
But if we
exchange.
designated it, that makes it easier, you would think,
I mean,
to negotiate.
to negotiate, but it also, will that be the exact place? No, but maybe
Yeah, it could.
we can like
We could.
negotiate around
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
A little this way or that way or something.
We could certainly update this map.
Well, isn't there like a parks plan that has some sort of overlay of where future parks would be, or is this?
I think this is it. This is,
Purple dots.
Okay.
But some of those purple dots are no longer applicable, correct? Like we do need to update because having a few of them.
So like that purple dot that's right by the cursor is actually up higher.
Yeah.
We actually acquired some ground to put
Okay.
a park.
It needs.
We haven't built the park yet. We just have the land.
So are we at a point as a planning commission where we could have like a working meeting? Lay this out or lay out a more detailed, city map and actually draw some lines. And the other thing I would want to also put in there, and I think it was a concern of Councilman Pulvers months ago that he brought it up when we talked about something like this, is to also look at the cemetery and the build out of the cemetery at the same time and how that would be included in this. But are we ready to have that kind of a meeting right now? And what would we need to do to really have some things in place to be productive at?
we're happy to print maps and have that available at the next planning commission meeting and just dedicate an hour of the first of the meeting if we have other items on it to running through these.
The next meeting is for this, but I think the community, the neighborhood centers document is on
Okay.
fire for me.
All right.
That's more.
Ryan,
So the future land use map.
And then
open
maybe
that.
next month we do some,
Okay.
look at this. So,
Yeah.
I know we need to pace ourselves. a
Yeah.
little.
okay, well, I have one, our hour training's got an hour and a half. So thank you all for your comments. This is helpful. The last is the Wasatch Choice Vision. I kind of had intended to get a little more into this, but I do want to show you what this looks like. So if you go, I'll just walk you straight through. So WFRC.org. And then
Used to work there, right?
I did. I spent 5 years here, so I'm intimately familiar. And so the first slider on here is the Wasatch Choice Vision. There's several bits and pieces that they follow, but you'll click on that. It takes you to the Wasatch Choice Vision, which is its own website, and Wasatch Choice Map. And this is the map that you can zoom in. It starts in Salt Lake, which I'm going to call them and have them restarted in North Ogden. It should. But you zoom in and this has the information. This is the entire vision all layered on top of each other. So the vision is made up of transportation, land uses, economic opportunities, parks and open space. And then there's Salt Lake City has their own layer because they do a little more intensive planning. But for North Ogden, you can click on any land use category. It'll tell you what that is, North Ogden downtown, what the general land use is, the stories of the buildings. And this is, think about it as like 5 counties and 63 cities. It's aggregated data. So it isn't perfect for our data, but it's just long range planning data. But you can click on, here's the neighborhood center on Monroe, what some of the estimated uses would be there. If there's housing, this is the piece of property that the city owns. And then the one further up on Washington. And if you'll put this on your calendars, the meeting is Monday, October 27th, and I'll send this out to all planning commission and city council, but it's the 2025 Wasatch Choice Vision Fall Workshop. They do it as in Northern Weber County. It's multi-cities and it's at the Marriott Slaterville city offices. And so it's Monday from 4 to 6 p.m.
Monday, the 27th.
Monday, the 27th
Could
from
you send us an invite?
Will. Yep, from 4 to 6 p.m. in Marriott Slaterville. WFRC will come and do a presentation. They're looking for feedback because they're right in the middle of this regional transportation plan cycle. And that will be adopted in 2027. So they are really looking for feedback on this now. But you can go in, become familiar with this map, see what all of the different, transportation, there's bike facilities on here. So AT is active transportation. The major collectors are the roadways. It'll tell you if you go into transportation, this is really interesting, but you can click on a road and it's designated by what phase that it's expected to be constructed in. So Mountain Road, new construction it's needed in phase 1. It's considered in phase 1. And if we were to build the remainder of Mountain Road right now, it'd be $49 million. So we pick up little pieces of it over time. And there's portions of it that are further out, but this shows Mountain Road will eventually go through Pleasant View, come off of the hill somewhere and connect approximately to Smith and Edwards. So it's Skyline Drive new connection. This one's, again, phase one needed, phase one, it's another $34 million. And they consider transportation, including all transit, bike, and roadway across the entire 5-county region. That's really WFRC's main charge, is in coordinated transportation funding. But over the last 10 plus years, they've really have dived into land uses. And what they talk about is how land use affects transportation. So you're right sizing the transportation to align with the land use. So we're not over allocating transportation dollars to roadways that don't support the underlying land uses, and then vice versa. We're not developing land uses that aren't supported by transportation investments. So I would go in and get really familiar with this map. You can cruise around it, and then they'll ask you for specific feedback in that meeting on the 27th. And typically they'll send you out a link where you can make comments on the map.
Is your confidence in their projections just that high?
It is, yeah. So they do the population, they operate off of the county control totals, which are estimated at a state level. So the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute gives the county control totals, and they take our land uses, and then they're identified kind of like what we think that the build out will be in those land uses. And they essentially filter the future growth into the entirety of the county. And a few years ago, this was interesting. I worked in Davis County at the time, but Davis County didn't have the land uses to accommodate the state's projection of future growth, meaning that every city across there, had they built to their large lot, single family, they would run out of room before the state said they're going to, there would be more people than there are housing boxes on the ground. And so sometimes those things change and shift. But again, that's the idea to me of vesting the general plan versus the market affecting it over a longer run, is that we likely didn't think in 2004 the Village at Prominence Point would be Village at Prominence Point. And we may not have thought 10 years ago that West State's development would become 350 units of multifamily. And who knows what's to come in the future again.
So they're high level of confidence in.
It's a high level of confidence. Yep.
So the parks and public spaces tab, is that just existing
It is.
parks?
Yep.
That's what it looked like when I.
It is. Yep. So it's parks, and then it has some trail access, and that'll be a good one to ask them. They just put it on the map. It's more like a data layer, not a future planning layer for Wasatch Regional Council. And then economic opportunities in our area are really those commercially considered areas. In some cities, it's the opportunity zones, which were redevelopment areas identified at a federal level for federal dollars. We don't have any opportunity zones up in our city. But you can click on these and it'll talk about what the center is, what we would expect for the land uses. This says that our Southtown area should be between 4 and 10 stories. Our current maximum height is 35 feet. So 3 stories.
With a flat roof.
With a flat roof. You can go and you can average that. So we have some 40-foot tall buildings, but as long as the average on the whole is 3 stories. And this is our, 2700 North and Washington Boulevard is the intersection of really anything that we would expect to get transit on in the future. And I think the best that we think about in the future is maybe like 15-minute bus service. So we won't ever see a light rail in our planning horizon in the next 30 years that's conceived of. But it's fun to cruise around the map.
Bus service.
Scott,
Is that
did I hear-
amazing to
It
you?
is. Yeah.
You have that UTA bus service.
And it's utilized.
Did I hear, Scott, that
Yeah.
UTA is going to be reducing our bus service?
Yeah, there's one bus line that's been cut back.
The one that goes up by Bates, the 612, they were going to discontinue it this year and they delayed that.
Yeah.
But it's partly because their bus by demand service is being delayed. So the idea is it's almost like an Uber, like you tell them to come pick you up, and if you're outside of a certain distance of a bus station, then they'll come to your house, pick you up, and take you to, I think they drop off where you're going. So, and it's supposed to be very cheap. No, it's small van. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. They
So
should.
that's gonna be in lieu of the bus line.
That was their thought, is that the cost to run that program will be cheaper for how many users there are on the 612. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't show upgrades to regional bus in our area for the out to 2050. So for the next 25 years, they're not showing major transit increases in North Ogden or Northern Weber County right here.
We're gonna have robots driving us around anyway.
We'll have what are they?
It's
The
already here.
drones, the human moving drones, right?
It's already here, you know?
Okay. That's really everything that the staff has. I appreciate your time today and going through this. If you have any, there were some specific questions. If you have any specific feedback on the discussion items, I'd love to receive those by email if you sit down and think of any questions. And Ryan and I will prepare neighborhood commercial for a future work session for you first, and then we can come back and sit around maps and draw on them. That sounds great.
And I'm sure there'll be
John?
further discussion on annexation,
I'll
Yeah.
particularly like.
unhook my computer. So will that put this Zoom back up? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any public comments from anybody online?
We have lost our participants.
Okay. Guess that's. Any remarks from planning commissioners?
Just to save time, and I can send an email too, but I'm really hoping that this future land use commercial neighborhood center comes soon. I think it's ready. I don't even think we're drawing lines. We have the lines from the Wasatch Community Regional Council. I do think the commissioner's idea of Washington Boulevard right along it could be a really interesting, easy addition. But I'm just hoping that comes soon. I think we're beyond ready to take action on that. So that's my remark, if I may.
Maybe the next meeting, could we do it in the other room and have it more like a actual make some decisions and
Yeah.
something together?
Work session.
Yeah, work session. Sounds great. Any other
More
remarks?
comments? Me?
Yes.
When we had the joint session, we talked about the water element and especially dealing with secondary water as we go up higher. If it comes down to forming some kind of committee to deal with those water issues, I'm in.
Okay.
So I volunteer.
Thanks for that. You've definitely got the background.
Do we have subcommittees of the group then?
Not yet. And the secondary water is an interesting one because the city sort of administers through the building permit process, that secondary, but we also don't own, maintain, or expand the system. So we're in this really weird
But if
relationship
you
with
like,
secondary water.
organize something that deals with Pine View and Mountain View irrigation and want to talk about things,
Yeah.
I'm
You're-
in to do
Yeah.
help on that. So
And the water use element is coming. I've got the draft and I need to coordinate with a few people and then bring that back to planning commission. And we have till the end of the year to do this. This one doesn't have a carrot or stick approach, like we're not going to lose any funding. And there are dozens of cities out there that are kind of right in the same time frame as us. So we'll get that done and adopted. We just had a regional meeting with several cities, and I talked to multiple cities and other planning colleagues about where theirs is at. North Salt Lakes is a really good example of one where they coordinate with other water systems, and their entire plan ended up like 7 pages long. It's just really tight, and then it has appendixes. So that's, I think, where ours is going to end up. And I think I've been overthinking it, trying to make it larger and more complicated than it needs to be.
I do have one other comment.
Please.
So the fiber optics project that's going on around us.
Yeah.
I was gonna look at our website to see what the status of that is. Is that progressing well? I mean, they move pretty fast.
Yep, they do. John may be able to give an update on that. It's a franchise agreement. So again, we don't own, operate, or maintain it. They're putting it in the public utility easements in front of homes, and they're moving really quickly. Do you have any update there, John?
We have two groups in the city operating. Some of it, they're going on top of each other. So one will come in and then another one will come behind. The idea is it'll give people better options, better speeds. But it does disrupt people's front yards in a lot of
I've had it
situations.
done
and-
twice.
Yeah.
What happens if they crack a sidewalk?
So anything they break that's city infrastructure they're supposed to fix, anything they impact that's private infrastructure they should fix. The expectation though is think of it as the grass will return within a couple months as opposed to immediate.
Sidewalk in front of my house, is that something I gotta report on?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you'll let Public Works Department know, then they will
So
come
go-
out and inspect.
So
Yeah.
I can go into the Ogden website and there's a
Yeah,
reporting mechanism.
yeah, report an issue, a Public Works issue, and then type in, this is my address. The connects or whoever
Yeah.
broke my sidewalk and they'll come out and inspect it.
So fast.
The second one was faster than the first.
Yeah.
Was it really?
First one took a long time.
Oh, it did.
Second one was in. Really quick.
Oh, you mean as they follow themselves, right? Is that what you're talking about? Or-
Saying there's two different companies.
Oh, so you're saying one's better than the other is what
Mhm.
you're saying?
No, I
correct.
said one went
One's
in,
better at installing than the
got
other.
in quicker.
Okay.
They've blanketed a significant portion of the city though so far.
Thank you for that.
Any other
Let me share that
comments?
comment. Thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners? Report from the Community and Economic Development Director.
So next Thursday and Friday is the Utah APA conference in Salt Lake City. We'll get Lauren signed up. That one's one that isn't time dependent on the costs increasing. So Lauren will let you know on that registration. Ryan and I are going to be carpooling down to that and attending both days. It should be really good. And it's local. This is the close to us conference. And then just put that calendar on your date or that date on your calendars for the Monday, October meeting, and I'll send out the Wasatch Choice Vision calendar invite and information.
Okay.
That's everything I have.
Remarks from the city manager, city.
No, nothing exciting other than just check your inboxes for save the date for the holiday party in December. So I believe it's on a Thursday night, but you and a guest are invited. So,
And city cleanup too is coming up, right?
Yeah.
The
City
fall
Clean.
cleanup.
yes,
20th, I think.
October,
I think it's
Oh.
the 20th through
I
the.
saw a
20th.
flyer on.
yeah, it's this month.
Posted today.
So I don't
They,
remember the
are they
exact.
gonna be running the leaf? truck?
They'll run a leaf truck. It still operates. And when it breaks, it likely will be done because it's too expensive. So we got that truck. It was an expensive truck. I think it was 250 grand. The new ones are 5 something. So it's likely that it'll go away when the old truck gives up the
Little duct. tape,
bearings. What?
Baling wire and duct tape and you.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been keeping it as best as we can, but one stick goes through those fans and it'll be down for a couple weeks. So yeah.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion to adjourn.